First of all, hello, Mr. Fink. It's nice to have you with us.
It's fantastic to be back. It's great to see you again. I mean, under the circumstance, tricky, but
Yeah. I know you studied Russian studies at the University of Edinburgh. Is that right?
I did,
Mm.
and
Mm,
it
Yeah,
taught me a very valuable lesson, I think,
I'm sure.
uh,
I'm sure.
which is obviously in Russian. "И потом всё стало хуже," which literally, and then things got worse. And if you take that as a mental framework, it helps
Mm.
dealing with and understanding what's coming next.
Right, well, maybe you know Professor Henrietta Mondri is an Oxford affiliate professor in Slavic literature and creative writing and Russian studies. She actually lives in university. She works for University of Canterbury in New Zealand, in Christchurch. Well, she's my aunt, so I guess this is why I was lucky to have a private mentorship in creative writing by an Oxford affiliate professor. But the reason I say that is not just to brag about the facts and flatter myself, but
Not
also it
just,
will be
but
no, not
definitely to
just
do
no,
that.
no, just one of the reasons. Of course, it is. But the other reason is, it will be interesting for me to get to know your opinion on a certain question and then compare it to my own vision. So my first question, I planned it like that. So you rightfully say in your article that it's not a question anymore. Absolutely, Trump is bad and mad and is clearly a danger for freedom, but he is legit, right? His presence is not as corrupted and stolen as Putin's is. So he has not stolen anything from them, the American people. He went through proceeding, now he's a president. So what do we do about all that?
That's a difficult question. I think the same question can be posed about Yanukovych because, technically, you could say that, yes, money was injected into Ukraine, influence is injected into Ukraine to sway people to vote a certain way. But ultimately, if someone is elected democratically with a clear majority and a mandate, then at what point do they lose legitimacy? The challenge here, of course, is that Trump, he didn't necessarily canvass on the idea that he was going to help Ukraine win, or he was going
Exactly.
to, any of these things. He said he was going
Mm.
to stop the war, and he never said how. So as far as I can tell, he's not broken any of his so-called, mandate or any of the promises he explicitly made, and he won a majority in order to be something of wrecking ball. This wasn't accidental. This was by design. I think many Americans voted for a wrecking ball, voted for someone who's going to tear things
Absolutely.
down,
Right.
tear things up. They don't necessarily believe he's the person, the ideal person to build them back up again.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of
They're like,
Americans are smart enough to think that.
yeah, well, the protest is in the core of the ballot, was the core of the ballot, I believe so, because the Democrats were constantly losing, yielding any ground in Ukraine, or to almost any opposing force, not addressing the painful issues, and just because we won't talk about that. But now we have Trump. Trump is doing what Trump is doing, and let's put it cowboy way straightforward: mineral deal. Trump needs that mineral deal, so to show his constituency, that is his constituency, that much that there's. I mean, he even dares to call Zelensky a dictator now. Even that is inside his reason, but yet he's ready to sign the deal with the dictator. So, should Zelensky anyway seal the deal, you think, or not?
I think this is very risky because if we look at Putin, we can say absolutely that Putin does not stick to any deals or negotiations he may sign unless they are backed up with, I would say, extreme force and the willingness to use it. So he might sign a deal with Erdogan, for instance, knowing that if he broke the terms and conditions of those, he would get a
Okay.
slap right back, which would
Mm.
hurt his interests. He may sign an agreement or a deal or have an informal relationship with China. And he knows that if he reneges on the terms of those deals, they can and will hurt him. This is one of the difficulties of Putin signing a deal with the West. They've shown over and over and over again that even if they have the means to hurt him, they pull their punches and fail to do so. And that they are allergic to the idea of Putin losing. They're allergic to the idea of Russia collapsing and would not do anything, even if it goes against their own self-interest, to force that as an issue. So the idea of signing any agreement with Putin, I think, from a Western point of view, is a deep delusion. Can we say the same thing about Trump? Well, in business, time and time again, it has been hinted at or alleged that he does not pay contractors. He does not necessarily stick to the terms of a deal
Right.
if the party he signs that deal or contract with is smaller and cannot enforce it from their point of view. He will only, I would say, adhere to those terms with someone who can show force and willingness to use it. At this point in time, whether this reflects reality or not, it's my belief that it does not. He thinks that Ukraine is weak. He thinks that Ukraine is losing. He thinks Ukraine is weaker than Russia. And I don't think he believes Ukraine can do anything for him. And you extend that to the figure of Zelensky. We are still looking at this from a values point of view, and partly a moral point of view, and a point of view of the geopolitical order that existed after the Second World War. Trump does not think in any of those terms. He is purely thinking,
Absolutely.
is this Zelensky character going to be useful to me or not? If he's seen as weak, then he will be of no use or interest to Trump. And we see that in this negotiating tactic. He is quite happy to destroy Zelensky and his reputation, chew him up and spit him out if that serves Trump's purpose. So in Zelensky's position, I'd be extremely wary of signing anything, because once that's been done, I think Trump could easily turn around and try with all of the means at his disposal to destroy Zelensky.
Even with all these security guarantees, if the security guarantees are there.
There's no security guarantee.
There's no guarantee.
There's none in the deal. There's none that are enforceable. There's none that he will go along with. He may put some contractors there to protect U.S. resources, but in any scenario where a full-scale war is relaunched by Russia, which I think is entirely possible within 2 to 3 years, if Russia is rearmed, if the sanctions are lifted, if the US help them to actually rearm, which is entirely likely, then they'll pull those contractors out in a moment, and they'll have got whatever they could. That's why he set it at 500 billion. Even though the US has only given, it's estimated around 150 or so. Why did he set it at 500? Well, he probably won't be able to extract all of that. He'll extract as much as he can before full-scale war begins again.
That's another question, because I've been working with for a company. It was ages ago that actually we've done some business in non-ferrous and residues, and also in rare earth. And I know this is a very difficult business, and the purity of the material is the question. And the purity after 9.59s after that. So to purify the material, we need a laboratory, and here we go. It's billions of investment. So maybe it is a kind of economical guarantee, not security guarantees at all, because Russia would love to have all that American building than just to have it again. And the war, another war, is not a question. I mean, it's only a question of when, maybe. But what about Europe? I mean, I love Bernard Shaw, and I love his Heartbreak House, Fantasia in Russian Manner. And that Scholler family, I believe, he's depicting as a dysfunctional family, as a Europe that is not ready for the World War I. I mean, 100 years passed since that. What changed?
Europe clearly is not ready, and I've been to many events where you'll have quite a few military people who are still speak about Russia's military capability in fairly derisory terms. Yes, Russia has proved itself to be not the world's second greatest army. It is even the second greatest army on the territory of Russia itself, because it cannot dislodge Ukraine from Kursk. So these things are definitely, there's some validity there. The trouble is they do still have the call of numerous resources. And again, this is a belief, I'm not a geopolitical expert, but I have studied Russia and the Russian mindset for more than 30 years and spent time there. My concern is that if the guns fall silent, well, one, they won't fall silent. There'll just be a downgrading of offensive, action back to
Right.
maybe the level it was, during the simmering long war in Donbass and Crimea. You might have, rather than hundreds of casualties a day, you might have tens a week, something like that. But this is still an environment where Russia can play games. There's still an environment where Russia can, generate the information it needs for its domestic population, for the kind of propaganda, the kind of, agit-prop entertainment that they do. I mean, war has become a big business and big entertainment there. But Putin's economy needs resources. So if the full-scale war is paused on, say, the Eastern Front, then what's to stop him opening another front? Into the south, into Central Asia,
Nothing.
into other
If you are,
countries.
right. Well, if you're asking me a question, then nothing. I've been here for 3 years in a row. So, and I know Russians. I've been in Bucha. I've seen pit in the ground full of dead bodies, and their hands were tied behind their backs. And they do it just because they can, and they will do it just because they can again. So, I mean, as simple
Yes.
as that to me.
Można
It's not a question.
powtarić. That's the phrase, isn't it? We can
No,
do it
można
again.
powtórzyć, tak. Well, right. So, I mean, I love the conversation where it is going. I just need more time. I got a lot more questions I would like to ask. But now, elections in Germany, in terms of Ukraine, what do you think we should expect?
This is, I mean, I'm not an expert on the politics there.
But you just returned from Germany.
I've just returned from Germany. I didn't have any political conversations, so
Well, that's pretty high.
it was more of a holiday thing. I mean, obviously,
Not to worry. Next time you can.
War is conspicuously absent. Yes, I wasn't at the Munich Security Conference. Unfortunately, I don't have an institution that's willing to pay all my accommodation and bills yet. But
I was there. I was in Munich.
Oh yes. I'll ask you in a minute what your impression was. I have spoken to Ben Hodges, of course, who was there. I'd spoken to a few people who were there. But of course, if you go to Europe, if you walk around the UK, you don't get any sense whatsoever of, I would call it sort of late 1930s vibes, which those who were following the war closely, those who are in the extreme pro-Ukraine bubble, get that absolute sense and have had that sense for the last 3 years that we are in the sort of antechamber, as it were, or the reception room of World War III or World War IV, as Russia thinks of it. But you don't get that sense walking around the streets. You don't get that sense in Germany, in Belgium, in France, in Britain, or anywhere. No sense whatsoever. There's a few Ukrainian flags here and there, a few mentions on the news, but you get none of that sense. You don't get the furious pace of rearming. You don't see military vehicles on the streets or on the motorways, etc., which I think you'd expect to see.
Exactly. I mean, but why would you expect to see that? It never happened in the World War One. So it's exactly why I mentioned Bernard Shaw and his Fantasia, because this Fantasia in Russian manner is going on now. It never happened in the World War One, World War Two. Now we're on the brink, on the verge of. I mean, if the World War Three is looming on the events horizon. Well, it's
not 100% true, because Britain, there's been comparisons made recently to Chamberlain and to Trump, etc. The thing was, Chamberlain, obviously deeply dishonourable, and in the Churchill phrase, about dishonor and war, etc. And you chose dishonor and you'll have war. But at the same time, Britain had started to furiously rearm in that period under Chamberlain. So he wasn't quite as sort of naive as people made out. And there was a tremendous effort to retool our country and military in the latter stage of the 30s. But we're not seeing that and that sense of urgency. And that's a big difference.
Absolutely. You're right. I mean, but the war was, anyway, it started and broke out, and there was millions dead. I mean, that effort, was it timely or not? It's a question to historians. But what's going on now? What is going on is I'd see that Europe is not ready again.
It's not ready. And the other parallel, of course, is that we threw Czechoslovakia, one of the most advanced, let's say, engineering nations, with quite a modern and substantial army and a huge productive output in terms of munitions, vehicles, and so on. We literally gifted that to Hitler, and we didn't just enable him, but we dramatically increased his potential to wage further warfare, because Germany hadn't retooled itself, and by the addition of these new territories, it got a lot of capability that it didn't have, as well as people, as well as brains and minds that it could utilize. We are risking, I think, the same thing. If we were to cede Ukraine in any way to Russia, we would be giving it the tools it would need to mount a full-scale invasion of Western Europe. And I think this time they would go a lot further. They would, as Solovyov says, they're looking
Why
at
wouldn't he?
Lisbon, and they're looking at end-to-end sphere of influence.
Yeah, he just wants to get to Como Lake to his two beautiful houses, probably, but you can't get a visa now. But I'm sure he can. I mean, it's. I've seen Russian officials flying all over Europe, and I know that Europe is covertly and blessedly always buying oil and gas still now. And I'm not talking about even sanctions. Things are happening.
Well, I did, yeah. I did a little article the other day on, or at least it's in production, and it's Russian LNG transport ships are still being serviced in Holland and Denmark. Fixed up so they can continue supplying LNG to Europe.
Right. Well, let's make that another topic for another discussion. But for the meantime, Mr. Fink, thank you so very much for your time and for your expertise. It is amazing. I would love to do it again when you have time.
Let's do that again. Thank you so much. Real pleasure.
Thank you so very much. Goodbye.